There comes a moment, quiet, heavy, when you realize the calls have stopped coming. The holidays pass without a visit. And when you do speak to your children, their voices sound like they're already somewhere else. You gave them everything. You fed them when you had little. You stayed awake on nights when they were sick, afraid, or lost. You bent your whole life around their future. And yet now, you sit alone, wondering if they even see you anymore. That pain, it isn't just sadness, it's the slow erosion of meaning, the whisper that maybe after all you've done, you no longer matter. But let me tell you something. That feeling is real. But the story it tells you does not have to be your truth. Stoicism teaches us that suffering doesn't come from what happens to us. It comes from how we interpret what happens. It's not the silence of your children that breaks your heart. It's the belief you've built around that silence. They don't love me anymore. I failed somehow. I'm no longer needed. But what if you could challenge those beliefs? What if this moment, this pain, was not a curse, but an invitation? An invitation to shift your power back inward, to stop anchoring your worth in their recognition and return to something deeper, your own presence, your own dignity, your own peace. Because here's the truth. You don't need them to see you in order to be seen. You don't need to be accepted to live with self-respect. You don't need their attention to be whole. You are still the same soul who carried love through decades. You are still worthy of being cherished, but not in desperation, not in begging, in the way the sun simply shines, with or without applause. This video is not a guide to changing your children. It is a guide to changing your relationship with yourself, so that no matter how they treat you, you are never again at the mercy of their choices. Because you are not powerless, you are not forgotten, you are not done. You are just beginning a new chapter, the one where you reclaim what was always yours. Inner peace. Lesson 1. Detachment. Letting go without giving up. To love your child does not mean to be chained to how they treat you. There's a certain kind of silence that doesn't come from peace. It comes from absence. You sit quietly in your kitchen. Maybe the sun is coming through the window. Maybe it's late evening and still no phone call, no message, no visit. You tell yourself they're busy, that they'll come around, that this distance is temporary. But deep down, there's a quiet ache that doesn't go away. It whispers, do I still matter to them? Did I do something wrong? Am I just fading? If you felt this, truly felt this, you are not alone. But today I invite you to see this moment not as the end of something, but as the beginning, not as rejection, but as redirection. Because the answer isn't in getting them to change, it's in choosing how you carry your love. Detachment is not giving up, it's giving space. It's stepping back, not to punish her, but to breathe. It's saying, I still love you, but I no longer need your validation to feel whole. This is not easy. You've built your whole life around caring, showing up, giving. But somewhere along the line, that love may have turned into quiet expectation, not because you're weak, but because you're human. We all long to be seen, to be thanked, to feel that what we gave meant something. And when that doesn't come, we start to shrink ourselves to fit their silence. We start to define our value by their attention. But the Stoics remind us, it's not what happens to you, but how you respond to it that matters. Epictetus. And here's where you take your power back. You don't need to stop loving. You simply need to stop tying your joy to how someone else responds to that love. Think of the sun. It rises every day, not because the world thanks it, not because it's asked to, but because it's its nature to shine. You are the sun. Love because it is who you are, not because you're waiting for applause. This is detachment. It is not cold. It is not distant. It is warm like the sun. But it is not needy. You shine. And if someone stands in your light, beautiful. If they walk away, you keep shining anyway. Here's a truth few will tell you. When you stop clinging, people feel it. Not in anger, not in bitterness, but in your calm, in your peace. And it shifts something. Maybe not right away, maybe not in the way you hope, but something changes when love is no longer a currency of desperation, but a quiet gift freely given. You don't have to beg to be seen, you only have to remember that you already are, by life, by virtue, by yourself. So if today you feel invisible, let that be the moment you turn inward. Not to close your heart, but to reclaim it. You don't need to stop loving your children, you only need to stop believing that their treatment of you defines your worth. Because it doesn't. You are still whole, still radiant, still deserving of peace. And today, right here, you begin to shine again. Lesson 2. You don't need to be accepted to be respected. Respect begins where self-acceptance lives. There's a quiet heartbreak that comes not from harsh words, but from being politely ignored. Maybe your children don't call as often. Maybe they roll their eyes at your advice. Maybe they've built a life where you no longer seem to fit. And inside, a question takes root. Do they still see me? Do I even belong in their world anymore? It's tempting, so tempting, to chase acceptance. To say just the right thing. To stay silent when something hurts. To shape yourself around what you think they want. Just to keep the peace. Just to be welcomed. But my friend, peace that comes from losing yourself isn't peace at all. It's erasure in slow motion. And here's where Stoicism offers a sacred truth. You don't need to be accepted to be respected. We often confuse the two. We believe that if someone approves of us, they'll treat us with respect. But that's not how it works. True respect is not a reaction. It's a recognition, not always of who you've been to them, but of how you carry yourself, especially when you're no longer the center of their lives. Respect is not something you beg for. It is something you embody, and it begins not with them, but with you. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Waste no more time arguing about what a good person should be. Be one. Be someone you respect, even when others don't offer the same in return. That's not ego, that's dignity." Let's imagine this clearly. You're at a family gathering. The conversation floats past you like a breeze through an open window. No one asks about your day. No one listens when you speak, and still, you sit with grace. You listen deeply. You speak when it matters. You offer presence, not performance. In that stillness, something begins to shift. Because strength, real strength, doesn't announce itself. It simply is. And sooner or later, people feel it. Here's what they don't tell you. People don't respect you because you agree with them. They respect you when they realize you don't need to. You don't need to argue. You don't need to fight for a seat at their table. Sometimes, all you need to do is build your own. And when you do that, when you carry yourself with quiet integrity, when you honor your own time, your own energy, your own truth, you remind the world, I may not be accepted, but I will not disappear. And I do not require your permission to exist. There's a kind of respect that only comes when you no longer try to earn it. It arrives when you stop explaining, when you stop shrinking, when you start living, not for applause, but for alignment. Self-respect is the root, and from it grows every other kind of respect you could ever hope for. You may not be in control of how your children see you, but you are in control of how you see yourself. And when you stand with peace in your spine and clarity in your soul, you stop chasing their attention, because you've already come home to yourself. Lesson 3. Break the silence with wisdom, not noise. Don't raise your voice, raise your awareness. Let's talk about the silence, not the peaceful kind, but the kind that echoes across the dinner table, the kind that lingers after a phone call that never came, the kind that makes you wonder if you've somehow vanished from a life you helped build. It's easy to feel invisible, easy to feel dismissed, disrespected, forgotten. And what's the first thing we want to do? Break the silence. Fill it. Shatter it. With noise. With anger. With words meant to wound because we're wounded. But here's the truth. Noise doesn't fix silence. Wisdom does. Sometimes you want to shout, "Why don't you call me anymore? Why don't I matter? How can you not see what this is doing to me?" But deep down you know, raising your voice won't make them hear you any clearer. It just raises the volume of the pain. So today, we try something different. We don't shout. We speak. With intention. With calm. With clarity that doesn't demand, but invites. Rumi once said, "Raise your words, not your voice. It is rain that grows flowers, not thunder." And this is the heart of the lesson. You see, when we shout, we speak from the wound. But when we pause, we speak from the wisdom. Stoicism teaches us that the space between stimulus and response is where our power lives. Not everything that hurts requires a reaction. Not every silence must be broken with sound. Sometimes it's your stillness that speaks loudest. Imagine this. Your child finally calls, and you could unload the 100 things you've held back. The bitterness, the guilt trips, the "you should have" and "you never." But instead you ask calmly, "How are you? Is everything okay? I'm here if you ever need to talk." That's not weakness, that's strength under control. And in that stillness, something powerful happens. You remind them that you are not here to fight, you're here to connect. Sometimes your silence isn't a void, it's a mirror. It reflects back to them the space they've left. And if you hold that space with dignity and peace, not resentment, they'll feel it. They may not say anything at first, but they'll remember the way your calm unsettled their noise. You don't need a storm to be heard. You need presence. You need timing. You need the courage to not. Seneca once wrote, "It is a great thing to know the season for speech and the season for silence." Sometimes it is your quiet dignity that begins to melt the ice. So no, you don't need to force a conversation. You don't need to rattle the walls with emotion. You just need to speak from the part of you that has stopped waiting for the perfect words and has started choosing the right ones. Words that don't blame, words that don't beg, words that bloom like rain in springtime. Soft, healing, unforgettable. Because in the end, silence isn't the enemy. Unconscious reaction is. And when you respond with wisdom instead of noise, when you become the rain, not the thunder, something new can grow between you and the ones you love. Even now. Especially now. Lesson 4. Change the narrative, change the relationship. The story in your mind decides the feeling in your heart. There's a moment, quiet, fleeting, when your child walks past you without meeting your eyes, when they cancel a visit with a short message, when they answer your call with polite distance but not warmth. And in that moment, your mind starts to write a story. They don't care about me. I'm no longer important in their life. After all I've done, this is how it ends. That story hurts. It echoes. It lingers longer than the moment itself. Because it isn't just what happened. It's what you believed it meant. But here's the life-changing truth. The story you tell yourself is not always the truth. And changing that story can change everything. Stoicism teaches us that it is not events themselves that cause us pain, but our judgments about those events. Epictetus said, "Men are disturbed not by things, but by the views which they take of things." What does that mean here and now in your relationship with your child? It means that the pain you feel, the sting of being overlooked, the ache of feeling left behind, is often amplified by the story your mind quickly weaves to explain their behavior. But what if that story isn't entirely true? What if your child isn't careless, but confused? What if they aren't cold, but carrying something they don't know how to share? Let's try something radical. Instead of assuming rejection, try assuming compassion. Not because they've earned it, but because you deserve the peace it brings. Imagine this. Your daughter cancels your weekly lunch. Instead of spiraling into, "She doesn't want to spend time with me," you try, "Maybe she's overwhelmed. Maybe she doesn't know how to say she's struggling." The difference? One story fuels resentment, the other allows space for compassion and for calm. This isn't about being naive, it's about being free from the mental trap of interpreting every silence as a personal wound. Marcus Aurelius reminded us, if you are distressed by anything external, the pain is not due to the thing itself, but to your estimate of it, and this you have the power to revoke at any moment. This is your power, to pause, to question the narrative, and to choose a softer, wiser story. Here's a practical example. Your son forgets your birthday and your heart, it sinks. The story says, he doesn't love me anymore. But what if the new story says, he's distracted, he's flawed like me, but he's still my child? That doesn't erase the hurt, but it allows you to respond instead of react. It gives you room to send a gentle message instead of a guilt-laced reminder. And in that small shift, the entire energy of the relationship changes. When you change how you interpret someone's behavior, you change how you show up with them. And when you change, so does the dynamic. It's not about rewriting the past. It's about rewriting your role in the present. It's not about pretending things are okay. It's about deciding what kind of peace you're going to protect. Because when you drop the heavy cloak of hurtful stories, you begin to move through your life with less weight and more clarity. Your child may not change overnight, but the way you hold space for them will. And that can open a door that's been shut for far too long. So the next time your heart says, they don't care, pause and whisper back, maybe they're lost too. Maybe this moment needs gentleness, not judgment. And just like that, you've taken the first step toward a new kind of connection. One rooted not in pain, but in perspective. Lesson 5. Let go of expectations, start listening. Expectation is the seed of disappointment. Let it go, and finally, you can truly hear. You once held them in your arms, watched over them while they slept, kissed bruised knees, packed lunches, waited by the door. And now, there's distance, silence, a growing ache in your chest that wonders, why don't they call more? Why do they act like I'm not part of their world anymore? You try to stay patient, but deep down, your heart keeps waiting. For a thank you, for a sign they still see you, for a gesture, any gesture, that says, you still matter to me. And when it doesn't come, your mind fills with stories, and your spirit fills with disappointment. But here's a truth as old as time, and as liberating as a breath you didn't know you were holding. It's not your child that's causing your pain. It's the expectation you've built around them. Seneca wrote, the greater the expectation, the greater the disappointment. He wasn't being cynical. He was being honest. We suffer not because of what others do, but because of what we believe they should do. You expected your child to visit more, to remember your birthday, to treat you with the same tenderness you once gave so freely. But those expectations, however natural, become invisible chains, binding you to an idea of how things should be, instead of letting you see how they really are. And here's where the real shift begins. When you let go of expectations, you begin to listen. Truly listen, not just to words, but to silence, to gestures, to what's beneath the surface. Because sometimes your child is speaking, even when they're saying nothing. Their withdrawal might be pain, their distance might be fear, their silence might be them not knowing how to talk to you. And when you drop your inner demand of, why don't they treat me the way I deserve? You finally create space to ask, what might they be going through right now? This is not about settling, it's about softening. Letting go of expectation does not mean accepting neglect or disrespect. It means removing the lens of should, so you can see with clarity and compassion. Imagine this. Your daughter forgets to call. You feel it deeply. But instead of saying, you never call me anymore, you ask, hey love, how are you really doing these days? No blame, no shame, just presence. And in that space, free from demand, she may finally feel safe enough to tell you the truth. Thich Nhat Hanh once said, "Deep listening is the kind of listening that can relieve suffering. And sometimes that suffering belongs not just to you, but to the very child who seems to be pushing you away." They don't always need your advice. They need your ear. Not the ear of a disappointed parent, but of a calm soul willing to hear without judgment. When you release the idea of what your child owes you, you make room for who they actually are. And sometimes in that room, a new kind of relationship begins to grow. It may not look like the one you dreamed of, but it may become something more honest, more resilient, because it's no longer built on demand, but on dialogue. So next time you feel that ache rise in your chest, when the silence stretches too long, don't reach for blame. Reach for listening. Don't say, "You should call more." Instead say, "I miss hearing your voice. How have you been?" That shift? It's everything. Because in dropping the script, you finally allow the real conversation to begin. Lesson 6. Compassion begins with understanding their journey. Before you judge your child, try to understand the road they're walking. We all want to be understood, to be seen beyond our words, to be known beyond our silences. But sometimes, as parents, we forget that our children crave that same grace, especially when they seem distant, irritable, or even cold. And it's in those very moments, when we feel most hurt by them, that Stoicism invites us to pause, breathe, and look deeper. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "When you encounter someone's faults, turn inward and ask when you have done the same." It's not a rebuke, it's an invitation to trade reaction for reflection, to seek understanding instead of superiority. Because the truth is, your child might be hurting too. Not from you, but from life. They might be struggling with pressure they don't know how to name, carrying wounds they've never spoken aloud, balancing a world that's moving too fast and giving too little space to rest. And like all of us when we're overwhelmed, they may not show their pain gracefully. They might shut down, lash out, retreat. They might avoid your calls not because they don't love you, but because they don't want to be seen broken. We often assume that their silence is rejection, but sometimes it's protection. They don't want to burden you or disappoint you, or reveal just how lost they feel inside. Compassion isn't letting yourself be hurt over and over. It's not self-abandonment. It's not blind tolerance. It's creating a space, soft, quiet, open, where your child doesn't have to be perfect to be welcome, where they don't have to explain everything, but they can finally begin to speak. You see, when you move from asking, "Why are they like this?" to, "What might they be going through?" something changes. You stop being just a parent demanding answers. You become a calm presence, a refuge. And in that stillness, connection has a chance to return. Let me offer you this image. You are a tree, grounded, present, listening. Your child is a bird, sometimes flying close, sometimes far. Not because they hate the tree, but because that's how birds are. They fly, they wander, they return. But the tree doesn't chase, it doesn't judge. It simply stands, with roots deep and branches wide. And over time, that constancy becomes a comfort, a reason to come home. So what does this look like in practice? Maybe, instead of saying, "You never tell me anything anymore," you say, "You seem tired lately. If you ever want to talk, I'm here." Maybe instead of confronting them with a list of absences, you ask gently, "Is something going on you haven't felt ready to share?" This isn't weakness, it's quiet strength. It's the strength of a soul who no longer needs to be right, but is ready to be real. In the end, compassion isn't about fixing your child. It's about loving them through their becoming. It's about recognizing that they're still learning, just like you. And when you extend that compassion, you don't just make room for them to heal. You begin healing too. Because in seeing them more clearly, you free yourself from the ache of misunderstanding and step into a peace that judgment could never give. Lesson 7. Serenity is your final answer. There comes a point in every relationship, especially between a parent and a child, when you realize You cannot control what they say. You cannot control what they do. You cannot even control whether they stay close. But you can control one thing, and that one thing is everything. You can control how you carry yourself in the storm. Maybe your child has drifted. Maybe they've closed the door. Maybe the voice you once heard every day now echoes only in memory. That ache, it's real. But your response to it, that is where your power lives. Marcus Aurelius said, "Choose not to be harmed, and you won't be." Not because the world suddenly becomes soft, but because you become stronger, clearer, quieter, inside. Serenity is not what happens when life finally gets easier. Serenity is what you choose when it doesn't. You don't need to scream, beg, or chase. You don't need to throw words into the wind hoping they'll land. You need only this, stillness. It is the most underestimated form of strength. Like a lighthouse in a raging sea, your calm presence can do more than any lecture, any plea, any silent punishment ever could. Because serenity is not weakness. It is clarity without aggression, presence without force, truth without noise. And in time, even the most distant sailor notices the light. Think about it. When your child lashes out and you remain steady, you teach them self-control. When your child disappears into silence and you don't panic, you model resilience. When your child misunderstands you and you don't retaliate, you offer the possibility of grace. Serenity is the most persuasive voice you can ever speak with, because it speaks in action, not reaction. It says, "I am not here to fight you. I am here to love you, but I will not lose myself to do it." Does this mean you won't feel pain? You are human, you are a parent, you will ache sometimes. But serenity doesn't mean you don't hurt. It means you no longer let the hurt own you. You don't build your peace on the shifting ground of someone else's behavior. You build it inside, where no one else can take it. As Epictetus taught, freedom is the ability to live as you wish, and no one is free who is not master of themselves. So what does serenity look like in daily life? It looks like pausing before you reply. It looks like breathing before you react. It looks like answering your child's silence with compassion, not guilt. It looks like releasing the need to always be understood and replacing it with the intention to be centered. It's saying to yourself, "I will not let this situation define me. I will choose peace, even if no one else does." And slowly, like dawn rising through darkness, that serenity becomes light, not just for you, but for them too. You don't know when or how your child might return, but if they do, let them find you not bitter, not broken, but bright, quietly strong, gently grounded. Let your serenity be the answer they didn't know they needed. And if they don't return, you'll still have chosen peace. And that, above all, is the kind of life that honors your soul. Because serenity isn't what you wait for, it's what you become. Final reflection. You cannot command the winds, but you can be the lighthouse, still, calm, guiding, whether they see it or not. And that is your final answer. So here we are. You've listened, you've reflected, you've walked through stories that felt familiar. Too familiar, maybe. Silences you know too well. Wounds you've carried quietly, hoping no one would notice, or perhaps hoping someone finally would. But let me offer you this. Real change was never about getting them to change. Not your child, not their tone, not their habits, not their schedule. Because waiting for them to change is a life spent in waiting. And you don't have time to waste in waiting. Change begins within. That is the Stoic way. That is the quiet revolution you were looking for. You don't need to raise your voice to raise your presence. You don't need to be louder to be stronger. You don't need to be accepted to be respected. And you certainly don't need to win every argument to prove your love. What you need, what you've always had, is the ability to return home to yourself. To reclaim your dignity not by demanding it, but by by embodying it. You are not powerless. Far from it. Every moment you choose serenity over anger, self-respect over approval, presence over resentment, you reshape not only the relationship you have with your children, but the relationship you have with yourself. And that is the one that sets the tone for every other. They may not call, they may not visit, they may never say the words you hope to hear. But here's the truth. You're still here. Still breathing. Still capable of creating meaning, peace, joy from within. Let go of the old script that says your child must behave a certain way for you to feel whole. Tear up the contract of invisible expectations you've been signing over and over again in your mind. Stop waiting for recognition that may never come. And instead, start living like you matter. Because you do. Live with integrity. Live with composure. Live with courage and compassion. That's what Stoicism has always been about. Not coldness, but clarity. Not detachment from love, but detachment from suffering caused by misplaced expectation. You don't need to control the relationship. You only need to control how you show up in it. And when you show up with peace, with self-respect, with grace, you become undeniable. People may not understand you right away, but they will feel your presence shift. And sometimes that alone is enough to begin a new chapter. So let this be your new mantra. I don't need to change others. I only need to return to myself. That's where healing begins. That's where relationships soften. That's where peace enters. Not just your life, but the space around you. And if you're wondering what to do next, start here. Sit in silence without resentment. Let go without closing your heart. Love without demanding. Even to what is not said. Be the calm in the storm, the quiet presence in the noise, the unwavering light in the fog. And whether your children see it today or someday, they will know. Something in you changed. And that change made everything else possible. You don't have to win every confrontation. You don't need to be right in every debate. You only need to live with wholeness, with dignity, and with the kind of peace that no one can take away. And sometimes, just sometimes, that's the very thing that makes them look at you with new eyes. This is your life. Thank you for walking this journey with me today. If this message touched your heart, please consider supporting the channel by subscribing, liking, and sharing this video with someone who needs it. Your presence matters here. Leave a comment with "I choose peace" and let us know where you're watching from. Together, we're building a community grounded in wisdom, dignity, and quiet strength.